Good morning. Here I am at Cooter's Garage. You can see so much going on. Motor out of the Growler, working on Jim's rig up here, this beast. But today Mike's going to be talking about exactly what he has going on with the motor job that he's doing. So enjoy the video.
So, like Rick probably introduced, we have the motor out of the Growler. This here is not a 4-liter straight 6 that originally would have come in that. It's more like a double 4-cylinder, 2.5 times 2 plus something. This is actually just a Chevy 6-liter LS motor. We call it LS. This was actually an LQ4 truck variant. But now it is not going to be original. So there was nothing wrong with this motor. It ran great, made probably 350 horsepower. But Cooter Jr. and I decided we needed more. So we pulled the motor out. It was due to be freshened up anyway. I wasn't sure the condition of the inside of it because this was a takeout motor I bought with like 2,500 miles on it. I've been running it for the last, I don't know, 4 years, 5 years. Hadn't really ever done anything to it. So we said, let's pull it out this winter. Let's freshen it up, go through it, bearings, rings, the works. In doing that, we said, well, we knew we were going to upgrade the cam. So what we added was from BTR Racing, a Truck Norris cam.
Not Chuck Norris.
Truck Norris. Put a little kung fu in your motor.
Yeah.
So that's in there. It's got brand new LS7 lifters, retainers, trays. Very important to change these trays out, especially when they get some miles on them, because they do two things. They hold the lifters up off the cam when you're trying to change a cam. And I don't have one out here to show you. The trays have flat spots in them, and the lifters have flat spots. And I've seen, there's videos out there on YouTube where the worn trays cause the lifters to rock and rotate just a little. And now you've got a wheel on the bottom of these lifters that is not in contact squarely with the cam.
Yep,
so that was just another side of it, because these are roller lifters like most of them. So took this down to my machine shop friend that I use. Can we give a shameless plug?
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, Mike's Engine Stand in Naugatuck. I don't know if he's got a website. He probably doesn't. He's kind of a one-man operation. He's got a beautiful machine shop. I've been using him for years. Just like I have a favorite transmission guy, I have a favorite engine guy. He doesn't do the assembly, but he does all the machine work. So he cleaned his block. I stripped it down to the bare block, brought him the block and the crank. He stripped it. He put a very light hone on the bores. He measured them. He said these bores are in really good shape. So no oversize on this. Standard main and rod bearings. He polished the crank. And I'll actually flip this over for you because we have to do that anyway. And then he gave it back to me. So very minimal work on this block. It was in great shape. It had low mileage on it. He even has said so. So what we did was we measured the journals right here. These we actually have to measure today. These are the rod journals. We measured the crank, the main bearing journals. We torqued all the main caps on with new bearings in it with no crank in there. I used my dial bore gauge. We first measured the journals, and I have a book over there. I wrote down all the sizes. They actually were all the same size. And then we compared that, and we ended up with about 2.5 thousandths, 0.0025 of oil clearance. Perfect, right on the money. Between the ID of the bearings, the OD of the crank. Also put a dial indicator on the end, and we moved the crank forward and back to measure the end play, the thrust bearing clearance. Came in around 6 thousandths, so we were good with that. Torqued everything, torque striped the bolts. So the crank is done, timing chain's on, cam's in, new oil pump. Just a Melling 295, I think it's M295. It's their high volume, standard kind of pump. The other ones, I guess, put out a bit too much pressure maybe. This seems to be the go-to one. I've used it in a lot of motors, and that works really good. So what we are going to do today is, all right, so today's project, and forgive me, things are a little messy here, but we've been working on 2 different jobs. Today's project is, yesterday my dad came over, we got all the pistons cleaned up. Because he didn't have to bore this block, and we'll talk about why in a minute where you're going to use these. These pistons were fine. They have a little bit of skirt wear on them. You can see on this wear pad here, but not bad. Not bad at all. We cleaned them all up, cleaned out all the ring grooves. These are floating pin pistons. You can see they kind of move. There's a snap ring in there, and you can actually take the piston off these rods very easily. But we're going to reuse these. I've got P-Series, Cleveite, Moly, bearings. It's their standard replacement P-Series bearing. They work out really good. They're OEM style bearings. But what Rick and I are going to do today is we're going to torque a couple of these rod caps down with new bearings in here. So we're going to take these old ones out, put new ones in, torque them together. We're going to measure these journals. They should be all the same. There's 4 of them. So we're going to measure these with the micrometer, get a diameter, and then we're going to take the dial bore gauge, which I don't have out yet, and we're going to set it to that dimension, and then we're going to check in here in a couple places, but mostly top to bottom, and we're going to see how much bigger it is than this. Should be about 2.5 thousandths, and that leaves room for the oil to stick to the crank and lubricate in there. So we're going to do that, and then the idea is that we'll put bearings, we'll throw rings on these. I already measured the rings and the end gap on the rings.
Yeah.
We're about 20 thousandths end gap on the ring. Good rule of thumb is on boosted applications, 6 thousandths per inch of bore. So that being what it is, this is a 4-inch bore, 4-inch. If you took 6 thousandths per inch multiplied by 4, 24 thousandths ring gap if you were running a turbo or a supercharger. So us being at 20 thousandths is plenty of clearance for our rings. So this here is a tapered ring compressor, and you're not going to be able to see this on video, but this side here is larger than 4-inch by something, and then the exit of it is 4. So this will sit basically on the block. When you put a piston loaded with rings in it, it will slide down and compress the rings, so it'll go up into the bore. These work really nice. I like them compared to the, I call them the oil filter wrench style, the band style. These are specific for bore sizes, but they do a nice job. All right, guys, so hey, just touching briefly before we put this thing together and you can't see it. These heads, so these LQ4, LQ9 motors, the truck motors, that's a Gen 3 motor. So that's like a 2004-ish. I think they ran until 07 maybe on that style. But these heads did not come on that motor. And you can search YouTube. There's a ton of guys on there that test all these different heads. I chose these heads. These are 799 casting heads. Rick, if you want to look, you can point out right there. Guys will notice.
799.
Yep. And then there actually is a VIN number in the side, but we don't care about that. So that's the VIN number of whatever these came off of. But this is when they refer to the head casting number. It's that 3-digit. Some of the older ones are 4, but 3 mostly. Anyway, this motor used to have 317 heads on it. These have smaller combustion chambers. Like they're at like 64 cc's. Where the 317s were like 74 cc. So it's a bigger chamber, which means less compression. So what we opted to do was I picked these up. I had the machine shop, went through, he did a valve job. He cleaned all the valves. So they've got some grease on them. He greased them up. Guides. I don't know if he had to do the guides or not. He didn't say. I don't think he did. And what's going to happen is when we go to assemble these, again from BTR, seals and springs, valve springs, and I have the retainers over there too. So the seal will go on, and then the spring will go on, along with a top retainer and 2 locks. And we'll do that for all these valves. And that'll round off the heads. The heads will be done. They're clean, they're pressure tested. He took a very, very minimal amount off the deck surface of them, just to make sure they're flat. These should leave me with a compression ratio of 10 to 1, 10.1 to 1. Wow. So what we did was, guys are gonna say, and I know you may get comments, well, why didn't you put LQ9 pistons in this? Which, yes, they are flat top. The only benefit I would have gotten out of that is an 11 to 1 compression ratio. So it would have, the flat top piston would have raised the compression ratio by a fairly significant amount. And it's not gonna add a whole lot of torque to the motor. It would give us more torque, more horsepower, clearly. But the problem is, when we run these things out in the woods, I want to be able to run them on whatever kind of gas I can find, which may not always be 91 or anything high octane. So being able to run it on crappier pump gas that we buy in the middle of nowhere was important to me, compared to a little bit of bump in compression.
Good point. So
that's why we're going to stick with those. Plus, I owned those pistons. I didn't have to buy a $400 set of pistons. So
nice.
That's that.
Okay. You want to just mention this oil pump here on the front?
Yeah, would it help to get that pickup tube?
Yes.
All right.
We'll talk about this. Keep in mind we're looking at the bottom of the motor. So here's the actual oil pump. Mike's going to go grab the pickup and show you how that sets up in here and would sit in the pan.
All right, so a couple more gizmos here. This is the old oil pump. This is the factory GM oil pump, and you can see how it's driven off of this is the sprocket that goes for your timing chain that gets pressed onto the front, and you can see it right down in there with the timing chain over it. So this is that. This actually goes on here all the way up to the end until it bottoms out on the crank. And then this is actually the old oil pump.
And it's notched and it spins.
Yep.
Spins that impeller basically.
It's got these keys on here, so that the sprocket is keyed to the crank so it doesn't slip, because obviously it's also the timing chain. And when you put these on, you can see in here how the gear sort of floats around in there. It's off center. So it's got a larger, if we took this apart, you'd see it, but it works like any other, they call it a gerotor oil pump. So one side is larger to pick up, and then it compresses. And these things, when they're not oiled up and everything, are a pain to get together. And I use this one for an install tool, so the end's probably a little peened over. But anyway, this would slide over that and sit together like you see it here. This has a pickup tube that goes on it. There is also a windage tray. I'm probably putting this on back.
Yeah, rear.
Windage tray sits on the motor. Helps if we put it together right now. Keep in mind this is upside down. So here's your pickup tube. Now this is another common failure point on GM LS motors. The O-ring is actually in the old oil pump still. There's an O-ring that goes around here. And there's one screw. Although if you notice, this oil pump has 2 screw holes.
Yeah.
But the factory tube only has 1 flange and screw hole, and it's fine. For factory application type stuff, it works fine. Racing ones, you'll see they'll come with 2, and they'll have maybe a fabricated. But this is the, make sure we Loctite and torque this bolt down. It's an M6 bolt. We're going to torque it down to, I think it's 106 inch-pounds. Then this will sit like this. The oil pan will go on top of it, and that'll be that.
So it's taking the oil, bringing it around.
It's going to draw the oil up through here, increase its pressure, and then it comes out actually through this little, you could see it right here, this little bump in the casting is where the oil comes out and shoots into the block. And then it goes this way, and then it goes down the side of the block, actually through this drilled oil galley, all the way down the side. these two ports are where it comes out to your oil filter, through the filter, which is in the pan, and then back into the motor.
Back in, wow, okay.
So there's
Terrific.
a lot to it. All these are all machined and drilled and plugged passages.
Terrific,
It's the feel of it. But you'll know when you get close. So Colin and I, when we did the mains, Delaney actually put the crankshaft in, but Colin and I measured the main bearing journals with two separate micrometers, and we didn't tell each other what numbers we came up. We came up the exact same number.
Oh, that's nice.
On the same journal. So he measured this one, and I measured it with a different micrometer.
But you got to make sure that you're getting the widest point.
Right,
Because
so you can see now I'm a little small, so I won't go over it. So I'm gonna keep backing this off just a little.
As you move it to center it.
Right, and I'm trying to keep it as square as I can. They do have big flat ends on them. Now see how I'm...
Yeah.
I can jiggle it just a little.
Right.
If I tighten it up too much, I won't be able to go past midway. Right about in there. And I'm going to put the little lock on.
Yeah, so we don't lose anything when you pull it off to read it.
Might be a little loose still, but we'll fine tune that just a little more. I like that right in there. Oily, so it's a little... All right, so here's what we got going on here. This is set to our crankshaft rod journal. We measured at, what did we measure it at? 2.099.
Correct.
Compared it with the book. The book says they're about 2.100. So we're a thousandth of an inch less or off, but within range. So what we did is we took my dial bore gauge, and now what we're going to do is we're going to actually put in, we'll probably do this on 2 rods. We don't have to do all 8. We'll put new bearings in, we'll torque the rod caps, and then we'll measure the space in the end of the rod and make sure we have oil clearance. So what we did was we put the shims in here and enough, I don't know if you want to show everyone how these come with different extensions. I'm using this one marked 2.0. We knew we needed to get somewhere near 2.1, so I added 0.1 worth of shims.
And 0.8. 0.8.
If we went to the next one up, it would be 2.2. It'd be too big.
Too big, yep.
There's not enough travel in, there's only 25 thousandths of range, so you need to get within 25 thousandths on the dial, and I'll show you that over here. So what we did is there's a little bump in here that when you press it, it swings the needle. So what we did was, this usually takes 2 people to do.
Yep.
We hold this in between the tips.
And you can see it zeroed right there.
Rick zeroed it out. Now, as I skew this just a little bit, or fall out of it, you can see how the needle moves.
Right.
That little bit of rock.
Yeah.
So we need to be as square to the center line as possible. But now what we'll be able to do is put this in between the rod, and this will open up, and we'll get a measurement.
So we'll get a measurement.
If we start here at 0, this is direct reading. So we put it in the rod. What we should see is that settle in on a number somewhere around 2 to 3, and that'll give us our oil clearance.
Yeah, and we expect it to be bigger.
Yep.
We need it to be bigger, and that gives you the oil clearance. Okay, yeah.
Otherwise, things will seize up.
Yep. So this is actually what we'll use now to measure inside the bearing.
That's it.
Nice. You can see that I just took this little bearing out. Same here on the rod. These are the old ones, so the idea is we're going to take these out, shit can them, and we have brand new ones right here. So I'll slide 2 new ones in, get them into location. Mike took the time to mark each side. You can see the number 7 right there. The bolts stay in, and we'll put the bearing in, and then I'll tighten them up by hand, and then we'll torque them. And then after it's torqued, what we're doing is we're going to do 2 or 3 of these. Then we'll use this instrument right here, which is all set up so that we can measure the diameter. And what we're looking for is 0.02 of an inch larger than the diameter on the crank. Okay, here's a new one. When you put them in, see that little groove and that notch right there is a good look at it, and you can see it right there as well. So that's how I'll set that up into location, and you see the same thing here on the connecting rod. All right, you can see the new bearing installed here. Pretty easy. You just kind of get it started and rotate it in. I just tightened up these bolts by hand. We'll get them torqued to spec, and then once they're torqued to spec, then that'll be definitively where this is supposed to be, and we are anticipating seeing the 0.02 of an inch larger diameter here to allow for oil to go around that. And again, that's what actually gets attached to the crankshaft right here. So pretty cool. All right. Going to set up another one. Once again, here's my second piston and rod. And I'm just opening these up by hand here. Okay, you can see that. And that's a good look right there. So I'm just taking my thumb. See how that just slides right out? Okay. And here's the end on the rod. See, I just took my thumb and it just curves right out of there. Put a couple new ones in.
They're both the same.
So you can see the aluminum jaws are in the vise. This is in the go position to be torqued. 11 mil head bolts and what, 15 inch pounds?
Yeah.
Or foot pounds, 15 foot pounds.
Ah, here we go.
So kind of interesting. So the torque here is 15 foot-pounds and then 75 degrees of torque angle. So the snap-on torque wrench was just set for 75 degrees. So now watch, he'll get some turn.
Show the display.
He'll get, yeah.
Actually tell you the rotation as we pull.
Yeah, 20, 30, 40.
Now let's say I
50,
stop there.
Yeah, 63.
I get 2 pulls to get
Yeah,
to
2 pulls
my
to get
goal.
to your goal.
And then it'll keep counting.
Which is 75. There it is. Wow. Okay, outstanding.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if you can't get it in 2, and there's some scenarios where you're doing something 90 degrees, and like I just did heads on a van, in the van, and it calls with a torque angle.
Yeah.
And you can't do it in 1 pull. There's just stuff in the way.
Yeah, so you get 2 shots, but it tracks what you had.
Yeah.
That's why you have 2 pulls, so he can back the ratchet off,
You can
and then
reset and
yeah,
then
pretty
get
pretty
to your final on your second.
pretty impressive.
Pull.
Just a recap. So 15 foot-pounds, 75 degrees of torque angle. It's perfectly set up. So now
I'm not going to look at this. You're going to read the
Yeah,
gauge.
yeah.
Let the people on out in YouTube land look at the gauge. So I have to try to get as square as I can.
yeah. So if it's right there, it's just a hair under 2,000. That's perfect.
Now
there's
watch,
2,000s right there.
Watch the gauge as
Yep.
I go beyond square.
Yep.
See how the numbers go?
Oh yeah,
way
yeah.
up?
You're way up now, around 10. But when you get square, when you had it square, you were at your 2,000s.
So we want the smallest value on there.
Yeah.
2, would you say?
Right there.
All right.
Right there, 2,000s. Wow.
So that's our oil bearing clamp.
Yeah.
We have a hole here 0.002 inches bigger than the journal that it goes on.
Awesome. Let's check the other one.
That's what allows it to hold
Yep.
oil. He's telling me, look, he goes, and I did it myself too. I just slapped in a used rod with used bearings. And actually, that's one of these rods is a used rod because we broke 2 rods on this motor.
See how that fits right in there on the end.
Yep, and it's got some rollers to
Yep.
center it, but it doesn't, there's nothing to keep it. You'll notice how I'm moving this up and down.
Yeah, it just changes
As I go
everything.
up, the dimension gets larger. So we
Yes.
want the smallest,
Yep.
and you'll have to read it and just tell me.
2,000s.
Okay.
Yep. When that
Now-
thing is level, 2,000s.
We could check it in a couple other
Yeah.
spots, but it's usually...
Yeah, I noticed that. I noticed that it has wheels on it right here. I'm just going to zoom in on
Yeah.
that so you can see the wheels.
Yeah, it's got little rollers.
And what do you call this instrument?
This is a dial bore gauge.
Dial bore
it's
gauge.
for measuring inside diameters.
Yeah.
Because we wouldn't be able to do that with a caliper. Is not accurate enough.
Okay.
But this is actually, all we're really doing is comparing.
Yeah.
We set it to 0. We set this to 0, which is the reading off of the journal.
Correct.
And then all we're doing is measuring the plus or minus from 0.
For the tolerance for the oil.
So this isn't actually going to give us a physical dimension.
Yeah.
It's just going to give us
lets us
the
know that
variation from what we calibrated.
just that there's a 2000s. Yep.
The 2.099
Yep.
or whatever it was.
All right, you can see the 8 pistons are all set up with the new bearings in there. They're just in the go position, and now the next thing we're going to be focusing in is on the piston rings, new piston rings, that tool that Mike has to install them. So that's what's coming up. We're getting everything prepped for assembly. Okay, I'm filming this because this whole piston ring thing is kind of critical, and I was a little bit surprised. So I'm going to let Mike talk about the first ring. Basically, you get a setup here that has components for the first groove, the second groove, and then the third groove. Go ahead, Mike.
All right, so you can do this any way you want. I like to do them in stages. So what we're going to do is all 8 pistons, and we're going to put the oil control rings on. So it comes with this expander. Now, there are different kinds of expander rings. This is pretty standard. The ends are cut. They don't overlap. They don't hook together. You physically can't do that. They just butt up together. So just like,
You can see that in the video. Yep.
There is a little, and I don't know if it'll show
a little
up
lip.
on here. There's a little lip. So we're just going to show you if we can. You can see how there's a little lip there. I can't go anywhere beyond that.
Yep.
It catches on this little lip. That's where this ring will sit. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the expander ring on the piston.
First groove, expander ring. Yep, there you go.
And
You
it
can
just-
see
it just
you can see
floats
all
around
kinds
there.
of floaty space there.
My dad did a nice job cleaning these up.
All right. So
Then
now,
we take the scraper rings, and you can see there's the gap. So, I mean, guys get carried away. There's a ton of stuff like, hey, you gotta stagger the gaps. Well, these rings move anyway. So if you watch any videos or you were to look at any literature on piston rings, they rotate around the piston. So sometimes the gaps will line up, sometimes they won't.
there we go.
So bottom scraper
So there's a
ring,
bottom scraper ring.
and then these things have a little oil on them, and they tend to stick together. So you just need to get 1. 2 won't fit, and if you did manage to get 2 in there, then you'll find out at the end you're short.
And this is the
This
upper
is the top scraper ring. So this is on the upper side of the expander, and there's a little less room now to put this in.
So 3 components are going on the first groove. You can see that right here in the video.
So I'll kind of hold it with my thumb and then just walk it around, and it pops
Boom.
in there.
First ring
Done.
is done. So we're going to do all the first rings.
Now
Then
I'll
we'll-
show you
Yep.
how the other ones go. I've got this handy dandy, I think this is Snap-on, but it's about a $20 piston ring tool. You can use it or not use it. It doesn't, I mean, you can do them without it. Sometimes this is more trouble than it's worth. However,
You can see that it'll expand it.
it'll expand the ring, and we need to go just enough.
Obviously, this is second groove, so he'll go down to the middle groove of the piston.
Hopefully. What I usually do, Rick, is we put these in the vise to hold the piston.
Yeah. Almost, yeah.
Okay. Now, it may not be in there yet, but it's like a snap ring, just kind
Yeah,
of.
just got to kind of work it. You can see it. You can see it's a little bit. It's in the first groove, so you just got to get that out.
Yeah.
There it is.
And with a little practice, too, and I haven't done these in a couple of years, so.
So he's just working
Last
that down
one I did was
into
on the
middle
6-liter
groove. There it is.
diesel.
So let's zoom into that. So there's the middle ring.
You can see the gap in there. When we compress it,
Yep.
that's going to go right down. Mm-hmm. Now, all right,
then-
doing it without the
Now
tool.
that ring could go either way. There was no marking top or bottom.
Correct. This
But the
one.
upper ring, the upper groove, you think has some nomenclature. Up top, right there.
You see where it says
Yeah, definitely see
top?
it. Yep.
Okay. So we want to put that up.
So that has to be upward.
Now, this is how a lot of times these go on And the top rings aren't so bad. You can just kind of walk them around.
There you go.
That's it. Now what we'll do is, like I said, here's the gaps. I don't know if that shows up on video.
Yes, it does.
You could turn these, but I can tell you from putting these in an engine, when this motor's running, these rings rotate. And they rotate independently at various ways. So these gaps could be perfectly in line. I could tell you right now, I don't care where they are. They're going to spin.
Mm-hmm.
So this piston is ready to go in.
Ready
We'll
to rock.
oil it. We'll clean everything.
Yep.
We'll clean the bores. Turns out these are factory stamped. This came out of the number 1 hole.
Number 1. Yep.
And
terrific.
So
all right,
so
so 1 is prep, 7 more to do. That's where we are right
it.
now.
That's
all
where
right.
we're at.
Nice job.
So
okay, so all the first groove, these are all set. So now you can see we got some second groove and third groove pieces to put in, but it's coming along. It's coming along really well. Top right there. You got it. You're looking at the top.
Right
Yep.
there.
Yep. Got to remember on that first ring, the middle ring, it's not marked. It can go either way.
you can feel it too. If you grab the edge, you can feel it's cut a certain way.
Almost. There it is.
That's it.
Just give you a close-up on that. So you look and you're like, wow, look at all of that space. But don't forget, it all gets compressed into the cylinder wall.
Yep.
So it needs to be larger. It gets compressed inside and you get that nice, nice compression. So we're looking at the motor. This is the front of the motor. So what we have is 1, 3, 5, 7. That's on the driver's side. And then 2, 4, 6, 8 on the passenger side. So obviously the pistons have been marked. Mike, they actually have a factory stamp on. So we want to make sure the right piston goes in the right bore here. So we're gonna take some brake cleaner, clean that out. Then we're gonna lube them, and we're getting ready to put the pistons in. Obviously, we will be connecting them to the crankshaft, torquing them to the proper torque. Get this thing all set up. Okay, Mike.
So the key is with these LS connect. These are fractured rods, which means if you look at it, see how clean that fits together. It's like when you snap a piece of wood in half.
Goes
you
together
can put the
really
ends
good.
back together.
Yep.
If I put this rod the wrong way, you can see what happens.
See the gap.
Now they're
It's
not
right.
always a big gap like that. Sometimes you'll look at one. Now I punched these with a 1 and a 1.
Yeah.
But the other trick too is just make sure the tangs from the bearings line up.
Like
that.
which you can see right there.
So when Rick goes there, whoever goes put this on underneath,
yeah,
you're gonna see this
I'll
hanging
do it
down,
underneath.
you're like,
Yep.
oh, tang,
Yep.
tang.
Yep. No problem. We're just inspecting the rings, but you can see the tool here. Okay. So this is the 4-inch. So this is going to sit right over, and it's tapered like a cone. So the piston will drop in, and then it gets narrower and narrower, and it compresses the ring so that it can then get into the block. So it just sits there, and you can see Mike's oiling the rings.
Now, what I didn't do, and we're going to do this right now, is I washed out the bores.
Yep.
We're just going to put oil on the bores, and you could kind of do it with a squirt can too. It's going to get a little messy.
Yeah. Which
But
we
put
got.
the bucket under
We got the catch pan underneath it, and then I'll get underneath with the
So dot on the piston head forward.
dot forward. There's a good piece.
This is number 1.
Yeah, number 1 dot forward, huh? Okay.
Yep. Believe me, I have no idea why that is.
So notice how this starts compressing all the rings. He has to actually. So it starts wide and then it's tapered.
Yep.
And this is going to basically guide the piston down, compressing the rings so that it gets into the block. Usually. And then I'll grab that bearing cap, get underneath the crankshaft, and get that set up as well. Good thing to take note is that the piston is marked number 1, which is fine. This is 1357. But what I didn't realize is there was a dot on the top of the piston which goes towards the front.
Yeah.
So Mike's just trying to get all the rings compressed and started in this tool.
It's top one there.
There we go. Nice job. Nice job.
Right. And now the skirt will center this.
Yep.
So this thing's pretty much centered.
Yeah.
And then I'm just gonna hold down on this. You don't want it to bounce, and when it does go wrong, what happens is if there's a gap under it, when the ring passes between the compressor and the block, if you're not holding it tight,
Wow, just guides it right in. Look at that.
the ring will actually expand under the tool and on top of the board.
Yeah, nice job.
Now
Wow.
I'm just gonna reach underneath.
Yep.
I've got the rod in my hand. It's already oiled.
Okay, I'll get
Down
that
on
fairing
the
cap.
journal.
Wow, nice job.